Happy coding.
Hey there, Kevin here, and welcome to our next video in our series on Intro to Web Dev. At this point, we have been learning a lot. I always say that at the beginning of every video, but it is true. We started with HTML, got into CSS, and then JavaScript. We've learned about control flow, so things like if statements and for loops, and different ways of storing data in things like arrays and objects. And we're going to keep building on that. And so this video covers another concept in web development called JavaScript libraries. And JavaScript libraries allow you to use code that other people wrote, which sounds maybe like, I don't know, stealing, but with things like open source code and open source libraries, people want you to use their code. And so it becomes this really powerful idea and lets you expand the functionality of your websites without needing to write all of the code yourself. So the only way I really know how to talk about any of this stuff is to just dive in. So I recommend reading the page, but I'm just going to kind of start to walk through it by coding, really. So I have prepared very little ahead of time, but I have my Scratch directory in NeoCities here, and what this directory contains is, well, some bee pictures from previous weeks, but I don't think we'll use them this time. But I have an index.html page, a script.js file, and a styles.css file. So maybe I'll start with index.html. There's not a ton of code in here yet, but we'll add some code in a bit. But what it does is it loads the styles.css file, loads the script.js file, and then contains some HTML that defines a container, a h1 tag, and then a button that calls a load function. Then in the CSS, it gives the background a light blue color and then sets the size and styling of the container. And then finally in script.js, there's a single function here, load, that right now just calls the alert function with hello. So that results in this page where I can click hello, and indeed I see the alert hello. And I'm starting with this code just to start with something. Hopefully all of that is review at this point, using the concepts that we have covered in previous weeks. But now that I have this starter code, first what I'll do is I'll kind of rearrange my windows just a little bit to be a little annoying, and move my sort of resulting page to the side. So I have my editor on the left and my sort of website on the right. This is kind of how I like to code. So, sure, good enough. Okay, so I'm going to start talking about JavaScript libraries by maybe just doing a bit of an example that doesn't use a library yet, and then we'll build one out. So right now, what I have is just an alert function, and that's fine. But let's say, for example, this example is going to be a little bit contrived. I don't want to show an alert, but I want to modify some text on the web page. So maybe I'll give myself like a UL, and I'll add some li tags to it. And again, this is I don't know, sort of a contrived example, but bear with me while we sort of think this through. And as always, I'm going to get real annoyed with white space, but it doesn't matter, Kevin. Just do the thing. All right. So I have an li, and maybe I'll just put dot dot dots in here for now. Again, this example is just for the sake of talking about stuff. So sure, and now I'm thinking about it. Maybe I'll just not have an li. Yeah, let's do it this way. So I'll give this an ID of output, maybe. And right now I'll refresh just to see what it does, and it shouldn't really do anything cool because I don't actually have any content in here. And now I want to write some code that instead of showing the alert, maybe adds like, I don't know, a couple of messages to that UL. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to say, I don't know, first get a reference to that output element. Output element equals document.get element by ID. That's really small. Why are you so small? And I think I called it output. And then what do I want to do? So I want to maybe create like 3 li elements. And we have learned about a couple of ways to do that over the last few weeks. So I'm going to maybe say something like, I don't know, let li element 1 equal document.create element li. And then maybe I'll say li element 1 dot inner text equals welcome, maybe, or maybe just hello. Sure, we'll say hello. And then what do I want to do? I want to see output element dot append child li element 1. Sure. And let's just save this and refresh and see if it works. And it does. Okay, so I see my output here. I see hello. I could maybe style that to be a little bigger, but for now it doesn't really matter. And I want to kind of repeat that. So I'm going to say, let's see, let li element 2 equals basically all the same code, create element li, then li element 2 dot inner text equals welcome, welcome, and then output element dot append child li element 2, li element 2. And I'll save that and refresh. And cool. Why didn't that work? That is because, let's take a look. Why do I have hello twice? Well, I have li element 2, li element 2, and li element 2. I do say welcome. Let's refresh and try it again. There it is. Okay, I must have not saved or something. That was weird. But now it works. Let's try it one more time. Hello and welcome. And then finally, a third one. I'm going to do the evil thing and copy paste some code. But you kind of get it at this point. li element 3, li element 3, and maybe this one will say, I don't know, bonjour. Sure, I don't actually speak French. I don't know if there's little dots in there somewhere, but that's fine. All right, let me hit refresh and hello. And there we go. Hello, welcome, bonjour. And that works, but it's a little annoying to write, as you probably were like half sick of it already when I was typing out the second one, let alone the third one. And I don't know, imagine a world where I want like 100 of these. Again, this example is a little contrived, but you have very likely written code that has a lot of like repeated elements and is just kind of annoying, and maybe you end up like copy pasting a bunch and it leads to really annoying situations. And so there is a way around this that we have talked about just a little bit. I've kind of hinted at it. I've kind of done it in my own code, but I haven't really like officially talked about it. And that is the idea of creating other functions. And so you can, we have talked about creating functions that are then called from like the HTML sort of event attributes. But you can also create your own functions that you then call in your own code. So I'm gonna do that. I'm going to sort of modify my code to create a new function. And so I'm going to say like function, I don't even know, like add greeting maybe. And this function will take a couple of arguments or parameters. So I'll say, I'll just say output element, comma, and then maybe text. Is that all I need? Maybe. We'll see in a second. And then what do I want to do? I want to take this text, create an li element from it, and then append that as a child to my output element. So I'm going to say let li element equals document dot create element li, and then li element dot inner text equals text. And then what? Output element dot append child li element. And now that I have that sort of helper function, I can modify my code up here to use it, to call it. And so what I will do is instead of this whole block of text, I'm going to replace that with add greeting to my output element with the text of hello. And then I can delete this entire thing. And then I'm just going to keep going, actually. Yeah, I'm going to keep going. Actually, no, I'm not. I'm going to hit save. And actually, I'm going to say like hello, 1, 2, 3 to make sure that I see something different. So I'm going to save, refresh, and hit hello. And there we go. Cool. So that's working. Hello, 1, 2, 3. I haven't actually replaced this code, but I can. So I can say add greeting, output element, and this one will be welcome again, just to maybe see something different. And I will replace that. And then finally, I'll say add greeting, output element. And this one I'll say like hola. I speak a tiny bit more Spanish than French, but not much. Just enough to order a cerveza. Okay, so save that and refresh and hit hello. And I get an error message, probably because I have a syntax error. So I'm going to open up my JavaScript console and I'll move it so my face is not in the way. And I do see uncaught syntax error, argument, missing parenthesis after argument list on line 6 of script.js. So let's go take a look at that. I see a little X here, so that's another hint. And sure enough, yeah, I forgot my closing parenthesis. That's a normal thing, happens to the best of us, and it certainly happens to me. So I'll save that again and refresh again. And now I'll hit hello. And now I see it. Hello, 1, 2, 3. Welcome again, and hola. Cool. Oh, that's funny. Refresh, maybe. There we go. And so the power of this is that my code can be vastly simplified because I'm taking any repeated work and I'm bundling it up into a function. And once that function is defined, I don't really need to worry about it. Like if this function wasn't even visible, my code would still kind of make sense. And I could still read it through line by line. I get a reference to my output element, then I call the add greeting function with output element and hello. And let's pretend if that was a function that JavaScript gave you. If I had told you in week 2 or 3 or whenever we learned about JavaScript that, hey, this is a function you can call, you would have said, okay, cool, I'll call that function. Because you don't really care about the inner workings of a function as long as you can call it. And the idea is the same with your own functions here. So in this case, we do have to write that code, but once we have it, we can call it from our own like our other code. And now if I wanted to add 100 of these, it'd be really easy. The hardest part would be coming up with 100 different ways to say hello. But that's kind of the power of creating functions. So that's not exactly getting into JavaScript libraries, but this idea of taking code and bundling it up and putting it in like a function that you then call is like really important in coding. And if we extend that, we get into JavaScript libraries. And so I'm going to do a couple of things. I'm going to go back here and I'm going to create a new file. And I'm going to rearrange my windows temporarily. Go away. There we go. And I'm going to create a new file, and it's a JavaScript file. So I'm going to call it something like, I don't know, tools, maybe, .js. And I'm going to hit create, and then I'm going to edit it in a new tab. So let me put that somewhere, sure. And by default, it doesn't really have any code in it. It's just empty, but we can change that in a second. So what I'm going to do is basically steal some code. I'm going to take this add greeting function and I am going to move it out of script.js and into tools.js. So now my tools.js file contains a single function, add greeting, and it's the same code we wrote before. It takes 2 arguments, the output element and the text, creates an li and then adds that li element to the output element. So I want to save that. And in my script.js file, my code is not going to change. The only thing that's really going to change is in my index.html file, exactly how I've already loaded script.js, I am also going to load that, that new tools.js file. So I'm going to say script source equals tools.js and /script. And I want to save that. And maybe just for funsies, I will make this say like hello again, just to make sure that we're changing our code instead of it refreshing and not changing and then counting that as victory. So I'll refresh this and I will click hello. And indeed, I see hello again, welcome again, and hola. And how's this working? It's working because if I start back in my index.html file and I just read it line by line, what it's doing is it's defining some HTML, it's setting like the title of the tab, it's loading our styles.css, and then it's loading tools.js. So it goes over here, and inside of tools.js, it sees, hey, there's an add greeting function. I'm going to remember that. It doesn't actually call the add greeting function yet, but it takes whatever this whole block is and stores it. It remembers it. So, there's nothing else in that file other than add greeting. So it goes back to index.html. The next line of code loads script.js. So we get to script.js and it sees that there's a load function. Nothing has called this function yet. But it takes this this code and remembers it, it stores it, and okay, then we're back in index.html, and it keeps going. It creates the body element, the div element, the output element. It creates the button, and it sees that there's an onClick attribute, and it sees that when someone clicks, I should call the load function. It doesn't actually call it yet, but it just knows that that's what it should do. And then it, finishes it out and finishes the HTML and then renders the whole page. So then when I click hello, it sees, hey, this says I should call the load function. And it knows that that load function is in its memory. It has remembered it. And so it calls that function, which actually runs this code. And so it creates this element, and then it calls the add greeting function. And add greeting is a function that is in its memory. Your browser knows that add greeting is a thing because it loaded this file. So then it goes here, calls this code, and that calls more functions, creates variables and all that good stuff, exits, comes back, and does it 3 times. And that's how it all kind of fits together. And believe it or not, what we just did is create a JavaScript library. So a JavaScript library is really just some code that you can load in your web page, and then use the code that's in that code in your code. That might be a little confusing because it's too much code, but you can imagine that tools.js is a library that contains a single function that we use in our script.js file. So to sort of, connect the dots a little bit better, I'm going to take a look at my URL here. And so I'm at kevinworkman.neocities.org/scratch. That's the name of the directory. And so all of my files are in that directory, which means if I go here and I change this, so I can see that tools.js doesn't start with a slash. So this is relative to my index.html file, which means it's in the Scratch directory. So basically I'm going to paste that URL in. Let me make sure I have the slash where I need it. Okay. And so what this line of code is now saying is load this file, load the file at this URL. And this isn't actually any different than what it was doing before. But this is now an absolute URL that points to a file on the internet. I mean, when it was just tools.js, that was still true, but it was relative to the current file, and so it figured out the rest of the URL from the current URL. But this is a normal URL that I can go to in my browser if I really wanted to. And so I could hit enter, and here it is. It's not super interesting to look at because it's just like it's a JavaScript file, so it's just code. Your browser doesn't do anything interesting with it if you load it directly. Um, and so, it's just a file on the internet. But that means that I can pass that whole URL into my script tag and then do, interesting stuff from there based on what's inside that file. And that might not seem like it gets you a lot, but what it gets you is now, if you know the URL of a like real JavaScript library, you can load it in your page and then call it. So let's see. So just for an example, let's see. Let's say I wanted to, in my script file, I wanted to show an alert. So I'll say alert, and I'm running out of ways to say hello. Bienvenido. Sure. I don't know. But I'll save that and I will refresh and I'll hit hello. And sure enough, I get bienvenido and I can hit OK. And then I see the content in the page. And as we've talked about, alerts are fine, especially for learning. They work, but they are usually not very pretty. They're kind of like really old looking and annoying. And so let's say that I wanted to create a better looking alert. And I could do that. We could do that by relying on the concepts that we already learned. So things like DOM manipulation and writing JavaScript that changes your page. So I could imagine creating a div element that contains the content that I want to show in my alert, and then maybe styling it as if it was a pop-up, and maybe adding a button so I can close it, adding some JavaScript code that shows it and hides it, and that would work. You could do that with the knowledge that you have, but chances are someone has already done that for you. So why not use that? And so I'm going to go to a search engine and I'm going to type in like JavaScript library alert. So I'm looking for alert or JavaScript libraries that help with alerts, and there's a bunch. There's a ton, and I'm just going to pick this first one. I did plan this out ahead a little bit, but I'm actually going to pick the second one. And so you can see like what the code would look like for it and like what that ends up looking like, and cool. And what I recommend when you're looking for a library is to click around a few examples, a few websites, try a couple of different options out, and then see which one you like the best. But for now, I'm going to go to Sweet Alert because I am familiar with it. And so I'm looking for mainly two things when I look at a JavaScript library like web page. First, I'm looking for how do I load it in the first place. And there's a couple of different ways. This is for like other ways that we aren't really using. This is for Node. But the way we're doing it is kind of the old school way of just looking for a script tag. And so I can take that and load it. So that's the first thing I'm looking for. I'm looking for how do I load the page? And then the second thing I'm looking for is like documentation for how do I use it? Like what functions does it give me? What variables does it give me? And in this case, it looks like here it is. SWAL is a function, probably stands for Sweet Alert, and I can pass it text or something. So let's do that. Let's see how this works. So I'm going to load this whole thing. I'm going to take this script tag that points to a URL on the internet. I can go here, but I will warn you that like any URL that contains like min.js is going to be super ugly to look at. So I will go here to show you, but like, this code is not meant to be read by a human. A human didn't like handwrite this code. What they did is they took their code and then they processed it to do things like remove all white space and rename every variable to be a single letter, things like that. And the reason they do that ostensibly is to reduce the whole file size. So if your file is like really long because you chose really long variable names, you have a lot of white space, then in theory you're using up a lot of like characters, which translate into file size, which are take longer to load. So the minification process kind of just makes a file as short as it possibly can, but it comes at the cost of you can't really read the code anymore. So this library is open source. So if you really wanted to, you could go look at the source code. They store it here on GitHub. So if I go to source, they use TypeScript, which is like not exactly JavaScript, but it's going to be pretty similar. Where like here you go, here's an if statement, for example. Here's calling functions. Here's setting some properties. I didn't really plan this ahead, so I don't know like if there's a good example of code that is worth looking at, but because generally you don't really care, you don't really look at it too much. Here's another if statements. Here's like here's JavaScript code that modifies CSS. We've seen that. Here's a for loop. So we've seen that. And so you can see that this is code that we could write. We could write this ourselves if we really wanted to, but it's, hundreds of lines of code. So if I don't have to, why would I? So I'm going to copy this in, and I'm going to go back to my index.html, and sure, I'll keep tools around for now. But I'm going to load my JavaScript library exactly how I loaded the library that I wrote, and it's just a script tag, points to the whole URL, and now that means that in my JavaScript, I can call the functions that the library gives me. So SWAL, hello world. That's so short that I might not even copy paste it. So I'm going to go to my script.js, and instead of alert, I'm going to call their function that they defined for me. So SWAL. Control S for save, and then I'm going to refresh. And I'm going to hit hello. And ooh, look at that. It's beautiful. My page is too tiny to show it. But this is the alert that the Sweet Alert library is creating for me. And so it's a lot friendlier than the old school, like primitive sort of native alert box. So I'll hit hello again. And it's kind of animated, kind of pops in and like grays out the screen behind it. And it's just kind of nice. And I didn't have to write any of the code that actually handles things like that animation, things like the styling. I don't have to worry about any of that. Okay, so from here, once I've loaded the library, it's a game of what else can I do? And so if I consult the documentation, looks like there's a way to, if you pass two arguments, the first one is the title and the second one is the text. So cool, I can play around with that. And so I'll say, I don't know, what should my title be? I'll keep my title as Bienvenido, and I will have text that's like, I don't know, welcome to my website. Sure. Save that and refresh. And I'll hit hello. And now it's a little different. Here's the title, here's the text, and a button. And again, I didn't have to worry too much about like exactly how are they adding the title, exactly how are they adding the text. I don't really care because it's in the library. And looks like I can also add an icon. So warning, error, success, info. Sure, let's try that. Let's try success. Success. And save and refresh. And again, I don't really know what it's doing with that, but I'll hit refresh and hit hello. And ooh, looks like I get a little check mark. That's cool. I could try the other stuff. What do they have, like error? Let's see what that does. Save that, refresh. And this like approach that I'm taking of just trying stuff out, like looking at the library documentation, trying it out in my code, seeing like what do I want to use. That's how you use JavaScript libraries. and it looks like X. Sure, that maybe doesn't make a ton of sense because it's like, welcome to my website. X, giant red X. That's not very welcoming. So I'll go back to success. Um, but that is JavaScript libraries in a nutshell. You can find a JavaScript library that does something that you want to do in your code, load the JavaScript library, and then write your own code that uses the code from the JavaScript library. In this case, it's a pretty small example of calling a single SWAL function. But even that is so much more powerful than the like basic alert function that you're given by default. And again, like inside of the SWAL function is JavaScript. It is JavaScript. It's not like magic that you couldn't do by yourself, but you don't have to do it by yourself. So save yourself time by finding a library that does it for you. Um, and this opens up a lot of like really interesting things like collaborating like across teams or across people by like calling each other's libraries. But for now, we'll just kind of leave it there. Okay, so that is JavaScript libraries. You now know the foundational sort of how JavaScript libraries fit together. In the next video, I'm going to introduce you to a specific JavaScript library called p5.js that I think is a lot of fun. But for now, you know the foundations, and that's what I wanted to do here. So I will say thank you for watching, and as always, of course, happy coding with JavaScript libraries this time. All right, see y'all.